Alright my friends, let me show you how Oath of the Crown Paladins can shut down entire encounters before they even begin, with incredible debuffing as well as massive damage output. Notice that we have no buffs on the character except for our day-long paladin auras, and before combat begins we're going to go ahead and activate two abilities, so we'll activate Full Louvre for Shriek. This character is one of the best in the game at using this extremely powerful tool, and then we're going to go ahead and activate Spirit Guardians for radiant damage as well. Enter turn-based mode, and then we're going to go ahead and start a combat. We'll use a different character to do this, so that our main character still has all of their actions. And let's begin a combat here. And you can see that as soon as enemies enter our radius, they immediately take massive debuffs. Tons of stacks of Radiating Orb and Reverberation on each of these enemies. Let's go ahead and walk next to them in order to apply these effects even further. So all of our enemies have stacked up a number of Radiating Orbs and a ton of Reverberation before we even attack. Let's go ahead and attack the Steel Watcher here. We're going to go ahead and just make a normal attack. I guess we do get a... Oh, they critically hit us. All right, well, we get to use a reaction in this case. So let's go ahead and do that and see if we can knock them prone. Even more reverberation and Radiating Orb because they happened to get a critical hit on us. Of course, we didn't lose our concentration on Spirit Guardians because our saves are just so good. Let's actually make our attack now, and we're going to Thunderous Smite this Steel Watcher. Go ahead and make that a Divine Smite here as well to max out Radiating Orbs. The Watcher is immune to prone, but against another enemy we'd have knocked it prone because of the Reverberation stacks. And you can see all of our enemies are at 10 stacks of Radiating Orb, except the one who's prone on the ground, before we even make our second attack. Go ahead and do that to make sure that we've stacked it maximally on every enemy. Of course, he's dead, so it mostly doesn't matter at this point. And then, if we hadn't used Thunderous Smite, we could bonus action cast Command with all of our stacks of Arcane Acuity to lock down enemies without effectively any saving throw to even further prevent them from acting. So as long as this character's in the game, enemies don't get any meaningful turns. Alright my friends, let's get to the build. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my pick for the best Oath of the Crown Paladin build in Baldur's Gate 3. This defensively oriented paladin powers up your entire party with incredible supporting abilities, great tanking, and of course the staggering damage that all paladins are capable of, and then caps it off with one of the best endgame setups in the entire game, combining the incredible damage and tankiness of paladins with the awesome control capabilities of clerics to give your party everything that they need, wrapped up in a single package. Combine that with some of the best access to some of the most powerful item combinations in the game, and you have a character that gives your party tremendous power at every level throughout the levels, with great early game, great mid game, and phenomenal end game, making it an extremely powerful addition to any honor mode party. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Travis Branham for the $50 donation, Armin Kaviani for the $5, and Tarantula for the $5, as well as Nick and Jacob Hall for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the extremely generous support. It really means a lot to me. Alright, let's get building. I'm using Minthara as the example character here because, of course, she is the paladin of the party, and this is a paladin build, but also she makes one of the best Oath of the Crown paladins in the game for two reasons. This character is excellent at using illithid powers, and she gets a head start on the number of illithid powers known, so she's better at using this tool that this character uses extremely well, and also her unique bonus action buff helps her empower her allies with a bonus action, something that you won't always have amazing uses for until the endgame. So Minthara makes an excellent Oath of the Crown Paladin. If you're building this as a custom character, then the best race pick by far are the newly empowered High Elf or High Half Elf. Any martial character that doesn't get Booming Blade as a cantrip known benefits from taking these as their race, because Booming Blade is just that powerful for every martial build, especially for this build where doing thunder damage is going to be especially useful for your character. So Booming Blade is worth taking High Elf or High Half Elf for alone, and will vastly improve the power of your Oath of the Crown Paladin. Other great race choices include Halfling, because we're going to be concentrating on spells and rolling attacks, so re-rolling ones is incredibly relevant for this character, and as well as making dialogue checks and just rolling a lot of dice in general. And Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf are excellent as well, because the additional movement speed will let us get our Spirit Guardians on more enemies and reach more enemies in order to engage them in melee combat. So those are the races that I would pick if I'm building this as a custom character. As part of my simple class guide series, for this build we'll be focusing on a monoclass Oath of the Crown Paladin. However, there are a couple things about multiclassing with this character that are very much worth mentioning. Firstly, Oath of the Crown Paladin makes the best 2-level dip into Paladin for any other spellcasting class if you want to get smite attacks on another spellcasting class, because their early game abilities are just so powerful. Secondly, if you're building an Oath of the Crown Paladin, there are 2 1-level dips into other classes that are very, very much worth considering. The first of these is a 1-level dip in Sorcerer. If taken at first level, this gets you Constitution Save Proficiency, as well as the Booming Blade cantrip, always incredibly powerful, the Shield spell, increasing your defenses even further than your already phenomenal defenses, and Storm Sorcerer's ability to fly, making you even more mobile in combat. The second amazing 1-level dip is a 1-level dip in Hexblade Warlock, which can allow you to tie all of your class abilities to your Charisma, give you Hexblade's Curse for even more damage, the Shield spell just like the Sorcerer in order to increase your defenses, and cause you to be able to increase your saving throws and damage even further because everything will be tied to your Charisma. So either of those make great 1-level dips, but for this build we're going to be focusing on a monoclass Oath of the Crown Paladin. So, of course, at first level, we'll be taking a Paladin level and choosing the Oath of the Crown as our subclass, which gets us the amazing Righteous Clarity ability. Once per channel oath charge, which is once per short rest at this point in the game, we can target ourselves or an ally with a bonus action to give our proficiency bonus to attack rolls for 10 turns. This doesn't require concentration or anything, it's just a straight up buff. You can precast it before combat and or even use it in combat because it just requires a bonus action. This is one of the very few ways to reliably increase your hit chance in the early game, and so it powers up early game parties dramatically. A +2 bonus to your hit chance in the early game makes you so much more reliable at winning early game encounters and prevents some of the most dangerous moments in honor mode from happening very consistently, because missing those early attacks can often spell doom for an honor mode run. This is also a great ability throughout the entire game. It scales off your proficiency bonus, so at the end game it's a +4 bonus to your hit chance, which means that you can use even weapons with relatively low hit chance and hit extremely reliably. As a paladin, all you need to do is land your attacks, because with smite attacks you do so much damage per swing. So Righteous Clarity not only empowers this character dramatically, making them way better at the thing they're trying to do, which is burst enemies down with massive damage, but also empowering any of your allies who really need to land hits. This works on every attack roll, so if you have, for example, a spell that requires a hit roll and uses a spell slot, you can put this on an ally and make that spell slot much less likely to be completely wasted by missing with a spell. So Righteous Clarity, an extremely powerful ability, both for the Paladin and also for all of their allies. For our ability score selection, there are 2 different ways that you can build paladins. You can either build them as two-handed weapon users using strength or strength elixirs to avoid taking strength at character creation, or you can build them using a finesse weapon and max out their dexterity. The advantage of a strength paladin is more damage, and the advantage of a dexterity-based paladin is better defensive capabilities, higher overall stats, and the ability to use elixirs other than strength elixirs. For an Oath of the Crown Paladin, I believe that we are always going to be better off using a finesse weapon. This lets us maximize the tanking capabilities of the Oath of the Crown Paladin, use a sword and shield while using our dexterity, and be as defensively oriented as possible while not giving up that much damage, because this character already does amazing damage and control regardless. Not getting hit is very important to this character because we want to be using Spirit Guardians in the late game, and we want to have the ability ability to help our allies as much as possible, so a finesse character works very well. We also are the single best class to use the best finesse weapon in the game, Cephalopocalypse, so this is a natural fit as a dexterity-focused paladin. For that reason, we're going to take no strength at character creation, and instead take 16 dexterity, 16 in constitution, 14 in charisma, and 12 in wisdom. At later levels, you can respec to reduce your constitution to 14 and raise your charisma to 16 once you get your aura that adds your charisma bonus to your saving throws. But having the extra constitution in the early game will allow your Oath of the Crown Paladin to stand toe-to-toe with enemies even more easily, so this is my recommended early game attribute split. Of course, since we're taking dexterity, you get access to bows for the early game as well, and you will want to be using a dagger, short sword, or one of the finesse longswords in the game. Of course, the best in-slot weapon for this character is Falar, because you are the best character in the game at wielding this incredibly powerful tool. For our skill selection, this character with 14 charisma makes a totally serviceable party face. You won't be as good at it as a bard or another primary charisma character, but you can definitely make dialogue checks, especially if this is your main character. So put your points into the charisma dialogue skills like persuasion and intimidation, so you can fill that role for your party. Even with low strength, taking athletics can still be helpful because as your proficiency bonus increases, it makes you harder to shove, so might as well grab that as well. And that's all the decisions that we have to make at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we get access to smite attacks, which of course increase our damage tremendously. As an Oath of the Crown Paladin, we're better at smiting than every other paladin is at these early levels because we hit more often thanks to Righteous Clarity. The tremendous amount of damage that smite attacks do combine very well with bonuses to hit. Although you don't lose your spell slot if you miss the smite, you do lose out on a huge amount of burst damage for the turn, so not missing is very important for paladins, and this paladin misses a lot less than other paladins, so we're better at one of the core aspects of the class than other paladin subclasses. For our fighting style, we actually have all 4 options as viable options. If you plan to be a two-handed fighting character, then great weapon fighting is going to be a pretty significant increase to your damage, and even as a dexterity character, you can benefit from this, because the finesse longswords, like Falar Alluve, can be wielded in 2 hands. For this build, though, we plan to use a shield because we want to be as defensive as possible and stay alive as long as possible. So we're not going to use great weapon fighting, but any of the other 3 are viable options. Dueling increases your damage, especially in the early game. +2 damage is pretty relevant. Protection is really good if your party is planning to play closely spaced together, because you can keep your allies alive with a reaction, something this character doesn't have a great one of currently. And defense is the best sort of overall in terms of just making the character harder to kill. As a generically strong option, we're going to take defense, but it's worth considering all 4 of the fighting styles, depending on exactly how you want this character to play out. For our spell selection at this level, we are always going to be taking Bless, because it's a great thing to concentrate on, making our attacks more accurate, and Thunderous Smite, because this gives you the option for even higher burst damage by Thunderous Smiting and using a regular smite attack in the same action. The tremendous amount of burst damage that you get from that by activating Thunderous Smite and then reacting with a smite attack to the attack mean that you can one-shot even some of the strongest early game enemies by landing that combination. Of course, at the cost of a lot of resources, but extremely valuable to have the option. We're going to take Command as well. Even with 14 Charisma, this is still such a good control spell that it's very much worth having, and for the late game, we will want it thanks to certain item combinations. And then for our last spell, we're going to take something that's a little more situational, something like Heroism or Protection from Evil and Good. As a Paladin, we're going to spend most of our spell slots on Smites anyways, so we want to take a sort of situational spell that's really good when it comes up, like Protection from Evil and Good. And of course, these are prepared spells, so you can swap them out as the situation calls for it. At character level 3, as an Oath of the Crown Paladin, we get 2 more subclass abilities. The first of these is Turn the Tide, which lets you, as a bonus action for your Channel Oath charge, heal all allies within 30 feet for a d6 plus your Charisma modifier plus your Paladin level in healing. The tooltip here is wrong. It should be a d6 plus 5 healing because it should be adding 3 plus 2. So I don't know why the tooltip is showing the wrong value, but at this level, it's a d6 plus 5 healing. In the end game, when we have 12 Paladin levels, it'll be a d6 plus 14 healing. This, combined with our Lay on Hands ability, lets this character actually be a pretty solid secondary healer. You can output quite a lot of healing. In general, you'd rather spend your Channel Oath charge on Righteous Clarity because attack bonuses are so incredibly valuable, but Turn the Tide really makes a nice panic button, or to get an ally up from being knocked unconscious, or to provide the buff on heal items if you have those equipped on this character. Their effects will be applied by Turn the Tide to everyone in your party, which can be very, very useful. So this ability, while a little more situational than Righteous Clarity, which is always good, is still a very powerful and nice to have ability. You also get Champion Challenge, which is also a bonus action in your Channel Oath charge, and it causes enemies within 30 feet of you to have disadvantage on their attacks against everyone except for you. There's a wisdom save against this effect, so some enemies will pass the save, especially because we have 14 instead of 16 charisma, but this will cause enemies to prioritize attacking you and can vastly increase the safety of your party, especially if you have a shield and the defense fighting style. This character will have very high armor class, especially in the early game, compared to enemy attack rolls. So Champion Challenge can force enemies to either miss their attacks with disadvantage against your allies or miss their attacks attacking your paladin. You can also use it and then back off to change their positioning or force them to take disadvantaged attacks. Again, this is a more situational ability than Righteous Clarity, so you're typically going to spend your Channel Oath charge on that, but in fights that will go longer or have a lot of enemies in them, Champion Challenge can be a very valuable tool. We also, at this level, get 2 spells as basically domain spells. They're going to be always prepared. We get Command and Compelled Duel. So that's going to let us unprepare Command from our prepared spell list, because we will always have it prepared. Compelled Duel you won't typically cast, but Command, of course, being always prepared is going to be excellent. And we can add in a couple more either situational spells or spells that we might want to invest in for the entire day. Shield of Faith can make this character even tankier, so especially if you're trying to use Champion's Challenge regularly, concentrating on this for yourself until you lose concentration on it can make enemies miss a lot more attacks. Heroism can be useful in some combats. Again, at this point, we're mostly spending these on smites, so pick up whatever you think is going to be situationally useful, though it is worth considering spending your day-long concentration on Shield of Faith in order to increase the character's armor class even further. At character level 4, we get access to our first feat, and like many honor mode characters before us, the feat that we are going to take is of course Alert. One of the great benefits of playing a dexterity character and getting Alert early is that you will never lose initiative again, and you don't have to invest in initiative gear at all. Paladins are often quite greedy for initiative gear and require it over other party members, but by playing a dexterity-focused paladin who's a monoclass, so we get 3 feats very easily, we can very easily max out our initiative to the plus 10 that we'll have in the end game, and win initiative in every encounter, even against the fastest enemies, all the way through the end of the game. Going first, of course, is always really good, and especially for this character, where the name of the game is bursting down enemies with smites before they can act, so Alert, of course, is the obvious pick. At character level 5, we get access to extra attack, doubling our damage output, and increasing our burst damage even further. We also get second level spells, which of course means second level smite slots, as well as the ability to cast some pretty powerful tools. As an Oath of the Crown Paladin, we get Spiritual Weapon, which again, for our bonus action, lets us summon a weapon which doesn't require concentration. This is a very useful spell for blocking doorways, distracting enemies, and hitting enemies who are on spike growth without the summon taking damage because it can fly. So Spiritual Weapon, a very valuable tool, one that Paladins don't normally get, and something that this character can use that other characters can't. Warding Bond is also actually very good. Usually you see this spell cast as a sort of abuse of Baldur's Gate 3's mechanics, where a character that stays behind in camp casts Warding Bond on your active party to just effectively have all damage that they're taking. But having this in your active party with this character is very helpful. Warding Bonding an ally will help keep them alive throughout the entire game. Splitting the damage in half means that your AoE healing is much more effective, so if you are using Turn the Tide for AoE healing, Warding Bond is very useful, and it stops your allies from dying in ways that this character can't prevent, while also stopping them from dying in the ways that the subclass normally can prevent. So increases your party's defensive capabilities significantly. Having this on a paladin is much more powerful than having it on a cleric, because you have more a higher health pool, higher armor class, and so on. So you have a correspondingly higher defensive capability to take advantage of Warding Bond. Using this on your squishiest ally is a very valuable use of a level 2 spell slot, and one that your Oath of the Crown Paladin should usually do. For prepared spells at this level, of the actual level 2 spells that we get access to, there aren't many that are significant. Branding Smite is typically going to be worse than Thunderous Smite or Upcasting Thunderous Smite, so you usually don't need Branding Smite. You can pick up something like Protection from Poison or Lesser Restoration as panic buttons, but typically your level 2 spell slots are going to be Smites, they're going to be upcasted level 1 spells, and they're going to be the Oath spells that you have access to, Warding Bond and Spiritual Weapon. I just had to step away from recording for a second because a truly impressive rainstorm just started here, so I had to go close all the windows before too much water got in. If you hear any background noise, then that's why. At character level 6, Oath of the Crown Paladin doesn't get anything in particular, but Paladin gets the very important Aura of Protection ability. We're going to be concentrating on spells a lot on this character, and so not only does this help us and our allies against enemy spells, this bonus to saving throws applies to concentration spells as well. At this level, you can respec to reduce your constitution to 14 and increase your charisma to 16, because the saving throw bonus is based on your charisma bonus, that's why it's +2 here. Also, it's great that they finally fixed this tooltip. It used to always show +0 no matter what your charisma bonus is, so 2 years later they managed to do that one, which I do appreciate. But this will increase your saving throws, allowing you to maintain concentration on spells vastly more easily, and of course also help defend your party from negative effects applied by your enemies. Amazing ability, one of the great reasons to have a paladin in your party. At character level 7, we get another Oath of the Crown subclass ability, Divine Allegiance. Now, it's important to note with this ability that the level up tooltip is basically a lie. It does not do the things that it says it does in this tooltip, but instead works almost completely differently. Here's how this ability actually works. When an ally within 5 feet of you takes damage, you can use your reaction to heal that ally for double your paladin level in healing. So at this level 14, at maximum level 24 hit points. And then you take that much damage in radiant damage. This is meaningfully different from what the tooltip says, because it, of course, is limited to those numbers, and also because this is actually healing and damage dealt that originates from the paladin, there's a couple of implications for how this ability works that aren't obvious at first. So firstly, the ally does actually take the damage before you heal them. This means that if that damage comes with a rider effect, some sort of debuff or something that the attack places on the ally, they will still receive the debuff, even if you mitigate all of the damage using the Divine Allegiance ability. Secondly, if that ally is knocked unconscious by the damage, you will then heal them back up from being knocked unconscious, but it will still count as though you had healed them from unconsciousness. So it will cost that ally's action for the turn, because they will have been knocked down to 0 hit points and then brought back to consciousness. So as normal, they will lose their action on their next turn. So you want to use this before an ally gets knocked down to 0 hit points. Otherwise, you will still want to use it to prevent them from dying, but it will cost you action economy in that case. Secondly, both the healing and damage count as originating from the paladin themselves, and gain all the benefits of effects that would be applied when the paladin does either of these things. So if we heal an ally, and we have effects that trigger when we heal an ally, using Divine Allegiance, those effects will go off. For example, the buff on heal items can be applied to an ally with Divine Allegiance, and you can apply Bless and Blade Ward and stuff as a reaction to your allies, which is a pretty powerful and cool ability. Most other characters don't get that, and applying Blade Ward as a reaction to an ally that's being attacked can prevent a tremendous amount of damage, so the buff on heal items synergize very well with this ability. Conversely, though, the damage that you take is both radiant damage and counts as coming from the paladin. So any effects that trigger when you do radiant damage will trigger when you activate Divine Allegiance. Since we're a paladin who does a lot of radiant damage and have access to spirit guardians, we are highly incentivized to be using the Radiating Orb item set, but Divine Allegiance will put Radiating Orbs on us, except for the Luminous Armor. I'll go over that when we talk about items. That means you have to be very careful with activating this ability, because you can often debuff yourself tremendously if you have too many effects that trigger when you do damage. Applying those all to yourself with Divine Allegiance can really penalize your character. So you have to be very careful with how this ability works and how you activate it and which items you have equipped. Again, we'll discuss that a little further in the item section, but it's worth understanding this ability because the game doesn't tell you how it works, and there's some subtleties and complexities that are very important. At character level 8, we get our second feat, and of course, as a dexterity-focused character, our second feat is going to be an ability score improvement to max out our dexterity. This increases our damage, hit chance, armor class, initiative, everything that this character wants, and since we're using finesse weapons, having high dexterity is going to be exactly what we need. Now, it is also worth noting that this character can use either the Gloves of Dexterity to replace taking dexterity, or just use a strength elixir in order to max out your strength, and you can benefit very strongly from those abilities as well. Doing either of those things prevents you from needing to level your dexterity when you level up, and so we can get access to some other feats. Some great alternatives, if you're using the attribute items, include Savage Attacker, excellent for any paladin because we're making melee weapon attacks and rolling a lot of damage dice because we're using smites. Re-rolling those damage dice is a massive increase to our average damage output. Another excellent option is the Sentinel feat. Sentinel will allow us to keep enemies trapped next to us and allow us to prevent our allies from taking damage, especially if we are a more grouped together version of this character to take advantage of our aura, maybe our protection fighting style, our divine allegiance, and so on. If your party is all fighting in a small clump, then Sentinel is very useful because then you're going to get a lot of extra attacks with the Sentinel feat. You can combine this with the Polearm Master feat and use a polearm in order to stop enemies from moving and take advantage of that combination. And the Dancing Breeze is a dexterity-based polearm, so you have that option even if you're building a dex-focused character. But for the basic version of the character, unless you're using an ability score item, an attribute item, then you're just going to want to boost your dexterity because it's the most efficient way to increase the effectiveness of your character. At character level 9, we get access to 3rd level spells, and this is where Oath of the Crown Paladins go from excellent to absurd. As a paladin, we now get access to Spirit Guardians, and this is the only paladin subclass that gets access to Spirit Guardians. This is such a good spell for a paladin because it allows us to apply the Radiating Orb effect. We're already going to want to be in melee with enemies. This is another reason, by the way, that the Sentinel feat is good because you can keep them trapped in Spirit Guardians. And this will key off of our charisma, which will increase our saving throws, which will make us less likely to fail our concentration on Spirit Guardians. Again, you can respec to take 14 con and 16 charisma in order to make this more effective. The constant damage output that we get here, as well as the reduction to enemy attack rolls from the Radiating Orb item set, the amount of disruption that we do, and the amount of control that we gain over the battlefield because we have Spirit Guardians, as well as just the excellent damage that it does to large groups of enemies if we can move quickly around the battlefield, makes this an enormously powerful late-game combo. So as soon as we hit level 9, this character gets excellent burst damage, excellent sustained damage, amazing control, and amazing defensive capabilities, and becomes just a one-person wrecking crew rolling through all of your enemies on their own. We also get a number of other 3rd level spells. Warden of Vitality also as a spell that's always prepared. Elemental Weapon can boost our weapon damage and attack rolls. Crusader's Mantle can be good if you have a lot of summons to boost the damage, but in general, you're always going to want to spend your concentration on this character on Spirit Guardians, so what other 3rd level spells you have prepared mostly don't matter. I would pick situationally powerful ones like Daylight, which can be good in some encounters and stuff like that. Because you're either going to spend your 3rd level spell slots on Spirit Guardians or on Smite attacks. In general, your 1st level spells selection matters much more than your higher level spell selection because Smites are just so good, and all your 3rd level spells will go to Spirit Guardians. At character level 10, we get access to Aura of Courage, which is another great reason to have a high-level paladin in your party. There are a bunch of fear effects in the endgame that are pretty devastating if you don't have a way to counter them. A lot of parties will use Hero's Feast for this, but if you have a paladin, you don't need to as long as you're standing near the paladin because everyone in your party will be immune to fear. At character level 11, we get access to Improved Divine Smite, Paladin's capstone ability, which is awesome. This basically improves the level of all of our smites by 1 for free, and makes all of our non-smite attacks effectively a level 0 smite for a d8 of damage without spending any resources on them. This ability is excellent. It improves our sustained damage dramatically and improves our burst damage tremendously, meaning that this character is even better at doing what it's doing. And also, this is radiant damage, so again, it applies all of the radiating orb effects and things that care about radiant damage that this character is very likely to want to use. So Improved Divine Smite, an amazing ability, an excellent reason to take a lot of levels in Paladin, and one of the reasons I think Oath of the Crown Paladins should be heavily invested in Paladin for at least 11 levels, because this ability synergizes with our items so well, and is exactly what we want to make sure our damage output and survivability and control effects are as powerful as possible. At character level 12, we are going to take our last feat, and barring anything else, the feat that we're going to take is an ability score improvement to max out our dexterity. However, it's worth noting that this character benefits tremendously from attribute items, as we already discussed on our previous feat. Either Ethel's hair, strength elixirs, or the gloves of dexterity can all mean that we don't need to invest this feat into maxing our dexterity, in which case taking Savage Attacker is a massive increase to our damage, so any of those attribute items can let us get a significant damage increase, and this character should be a priority user for those if you want them somewhere in your party. This is one of the better characters to make use of them. Either way, though, we have now finished off our Oath of the Crown Paladin and have a tremendously powerful tank, damage dealer, control caster, and utility character, as well as a great healer. But of course we can make ourselves even stronger with items, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, one of the great things about the Oath of the Crown Paladin is that we're very independent of items. We get access to and are one of the best users for some of the most powerful item combos in the game, so we can use those, but we're also very happy just equipping items that are left over from our other party members who need specific items more. There are one or two items that we definitely want, though, and the first of these is Falar Louv. This is a finesse longsword, so we can attack with it using our dexterity, and of course it has the melody ability, allowing us to sing to buff our allies or shriek to deal extra damage to our enemies. This character is the single best character in the game to carry this weapon, and this is one of the best weapons and one of the best tools in Baldur's Gate 3 in general, because you already want to be in melee range of enemies, so you will always be in range to shriek. And you can use this ability in combination with the consistent sources of damage that you have to activate this many, many times. The extra thunder damage will proc off of your Spirit Guardian's damage, off of your attack damage, and so you'll be doing a lot of instances of this, and then you will also be able to add debuffs to this extra damage with the Radiating Orb and Reverberation item sets in order to take the maximum advantage of this incredibly powerful tool. It also helps your allies do a ton of extra damage as well, so this character is one of the best in the game at wielding this incredibly powerful weapon. We also, as a dexterity-based tank, want one of the armors that will allow you to use your full dexterity for armor class, like the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail, or in the late game, the Armor of Agility. There is an alternative to this, and that's to equip the Luminous Armor, which of course creates radiating orbs, and in the very late game, the Luminous Armor will be better, because once you are applying radiating orbs with your Spirit Guardians, your armor class matters a lot less, because enemies will be taking such a massive penalty to their AC. So in the mid-game, you're going to use one of the uncapped Dex armors, and in the late game, you're going to swap back to the Luminous Armor, which is probably what you used in Act 1 before you got access to these armors as well. We also, of course, want a shield, and this character can use Viconia's Walking Fortress. We're probably the best character in the game to use this, because we don't need the bonus initiative from the Sentinel Shield. We've already got +10. We don't need the bonus save DC from Ketheric's Shield, so we can use this legendary shield more effectively than most other shield users, and of course, the higher our armor class, the better. Other increases to our AC are also excellent. The Cloak of Protection will mean that we will lose concentration on our spells and take less damage overall, so very useful tool there. So I would recommend that as our cloak, though the Cloak of Displacement or the Wave Mother's Cloak are also great late game options. In addition to these things, there's really not that much that you specifically need, but we do get some truly amazing combinations. This character is great at using the Helmet of Arcane Acuity and the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. We have Command as a spell known, we're making a lot of weapon attacks, so we can build up Arcane Acuity stacks to make enemies fail saving throws, and then bonus action Command to hit them with unsavable control spells to lock down enemies very, very easily. It's a little expensive on spell slots, which we don't have that many of, but this character is still a great candidate for this combo if you don't have another character that's using it. Of course, because we do a lot of healing with our bonus action Turn the Tide, our Lay on Hands, and we can also carry and throw potions and stuff like that, we can use the Buff on Heal item set, the Hellrider's Pride, the Boots of Aid and Comfort, and the Whispering Promise in order to apply Bless and Blade Ward to every ally that we heal. This character again is a great candidate for this item set, especially if you don't have a cleric or other dedicated healer in your party. And using at least part of this item set, even on into the late game, will allow you to take great advantage of the healing that you're doing. Now, it does conflict with the Radiating Orb item set because it uses the same slots, but that's actually okay for this character because a lot of our healing is coming from Divine Allegiance, which we aren't going to use as much if we're using Radiating Orbs. So if you want this character to be more supporty, you can equip these items and then not orb yourself when you activate Divine Allegiance and use Divine Allegiance a lot. If you want the character to be more offensive and controlling, you can use the Radiating Orb set. The Radiating Orb set is stronger overall, but both are great options. Of course, the Radiating Orb set includes the Luminous Armor, so when we deal radiant damage, which we're doing constantly, we release a Radiant Shockwave, the Callous Glow Ring to add radiant damage to all of our damage effects, and the Boots of Stormy Clamor and Gloves of Belligerent Skies. These let us add reverberation to those effects as well, so we can do more damage and knock enemies prone, and so on. The Luminous Gloves can let us stack Radiating Orbs even faster, so that's definitely an option as well. We also don't need the Coruscation Ring, which often goes in this set, because that doesn't apply on Spirit Guardians, and we aren't otherwise doing spell damage, so we can save our ring slot, for example, for the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. The strongest possible late-game item setup for this character is probably the Radiating Orb item setup, with the Callous Glow Ring and this, and then the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel and Helm of Arcane Acuity. This will let you use two of the strongest control combos in the game while also being incredibly tanky, great at protecting your allies, providing a ton of healing, and doing awesome damage, making this an incredibly powerful late-game character. Some other important options are the Elixir of Hill Giant Strength or Gloves of Dexterity, which can let you take the extra feats that we discussed, and also could let you use a strength-based weapon if you prefer, especially if you are planning to do the Polar Master and Sentinel combination with this character, which is an alternative way that you can build them, and it's very powerful as well. As a paladin, of course, we benefit from anything that increases our critical hit chance, so if you don't want to use these debuffing item sets, then items that increase your critical hits can make your smites do a lot more damage, and items that can guarantee critical hits like the Killer's Sweetheart are very effective as well. The Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet is a nice one, giving you some control, and combos really well with the Killer's Sweetheart for guaranteed paralysis on humanoid enemies, so that's another possible combo that you can use. An item like the Disintegrating Nightwalkers or the Amulet of Misty Step, which I would add in the amulet slot here, are very helpful for this character also. We don't otherwise get Misty Step, and most characters should have access to that because it's a great tool to have access to in general. So, this character can apply Radiating Orbs, Reverberation, amazing damage, great survivability, great tanking abilities, all in a single package. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Oath of the Crown Paladin, and I hope it helps you plan out your honor mode parties. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. YouTube loves it when people push buttons, so it really does help out. The best way to support any creator whose work you enjoy. Of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis, and thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.